Wayne, as I said, is a board member, and he is he's a retired archaeologist for the State Department of Transportation. And he is going to be speaking to us tonight. So without further ado, an evening with Wayne Roberts.
Pull this aside a little more. I ain't anybody's way. Can you see the screen? Good. All right. My topic today is Old Roads and Battlefields, South Carolina Department of Transportation, Archaeology, and the Revolutionary War, or how South Carolina won the war for the other 12 colonies. If not, for these battles I'm going to talk about tonight, and others in South Carolina in the upstate during 1780 and 81, you know what we'd be doing today? We'd be speaking English. Could say y'all, not proper British. All right. I soon noticed after I arrived at the DOT to serve as chief archaeologist 30 plus years ago that the historic Mills Atlas, you familiar with the Mills Atlas? You can get the small edition today. It's been out of print since 1825, but they reprinted it a few decades ago in the original size. It would be about that tall, about this wide. And I noticed that if you would take the maps inside, and there's one for each district in the state. I just happened to open up to Georgetown County, so if we do that, I'll just go one more to Greenville. I noticed that the maps in the Mills Atlas were the same size as the small size DOT county maps. And that if you would take one of the county maps and these reproduction issues of the large full-size Mills Atlas, you could take them apart. They were only held by these posts. They were 3-hole punch. And you could take them out and you could lay that map on the light table, and you could take the current county map that matched up to that. And I was just shocked, stunned, to see how many roads from the 18th and early 19th century were pretty much identical to the modern road we drive on. And that was a revelation. So, it should come as no surprise that over the years, South Carolina Department of Transportation has had to do with several Revolutionary War and Civil War sites. Events that happened along our old roadways. Now, why does the SCDOT do archaeology? They don't do it because they're nice guys. They do it because there's a federal law that forces them to. Most highway projects in the state are 80% federal tax dollars, 20% state tax dollars. If you want Uncle Sugar's money, you got to play by Uncle Sugar's rules. And that means the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. That says that federal funds cannot be used arbitrarily to destroy archaeological and historic sites that are listed in or eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Archaeological and architectural surveys are conducted to locate sites on highway projects and assess these sites to see if they're eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. If they are eligible, then we have to assess the effects of the project on the site. Is there no effect? In most cases, there's no effect. Is there no adverse effect? That means you're having an effect, but it's a minor effect, and that project can go ahead and be built? Or is there an adverse effect? Now, the key here is you cannot arbitrarily destroy it. You can have the best archaeological site in the state, and you could probably still conduct your highway project. You just can't arbitrarily destroy it. You have to mitigate the adverse effects. Usually that means what's called an archaeological data recovery excavation. A large-scale archaeological project that would probably cost at least $100,000 to $300,000 maybe, especially if it's a large site. I found out dealing with engineers, that's chump change. When you're talking about a $100 million project, $100,000, chump change. They're willing to pay that if it gets them their project built. So they thought I was the booger man at first, but they found out that I'm easy to deal with. In South Carolina, there are no state cultural resource laws to prevent the DOT or any other state agency using only state tax dollars to destroy sites. There are town, city ordinances in Charleston and Hilton Head, though, that deal with archaeological, architectural sites. Well, let's move ahead. I'm going to talk to you tonight about two sites. First is up here. Can you see that dot? Is this dot any better?
Yes.
Okay. This is the battlefield at Earle's Ford in Spartanburg County in yellow. This was the road S-128 / North Pacolet River Bridge Replacement Project. And it is right up here in northwestern Spartanburg, hard against the North Carolina state line. This is also, according to local historians, the location of the Battle of Earle's Ford on July 15, 1780. Second project is in Lancaster County, shown here in yellow. It's the Battle of the Waxhaws, also known as Buford's Massacre. And we'll talk more about that later. First, we'll talk about the Battle of Earle's Ford. Now this is our project area. This is I-26. This is Landrum. South Carolina 14, you can pick it up right here, right up the street here. Goes through Greer. It comes on up through Landrum. This is 14. But when it comes to right here, it loses its state highway designation. It's no longer SC Route 14. It's now Road S-128, a rural secondary road. And it continues as S-128 all the way to the state line, crossing the North Pacolet River. So we're replacing the bridge. What we frequently do with bridge replacements, you don't want to close the bridge if you can help it. You want the bridge to be open while you're building the new bridge. So you build a new bridge next to the old bridge. Once the new bridge is open, you tear down the old bridge. So that's what we did here. We're shifting slightly to the right or downstream on the North Pacolet River. Blue Ridge Mountains are just right up here, just out of sight. A beautiful, big, wide river bottom. It's just one of the prettiest views you'll have in the state. It really is. Just absolutely beautiful. The red that you see here is the length of our project. The bridge approaches the highway at both ends, and you notice it's actually two red lines there. When we get to the bridge, we get more right-of-way than just the width of the bridge. We get 75 feet minimum, because not only do we have the bridge there, but we have to maintain the bridge, and sometimes we have to get heavy equipment down below to make repairs. So we get 150 feet total, 75 feet on each side, whereas standard is 37.5 feet, which replaces the old standard of 33 feet. You can see the roads are getting wider and hopefully safer in the future. So this is our area of potential effect. This is what we will be affecting. It's always nice when people, like the DAR in this case, put these markers out. I always like it when people let you know where the historic sites are. Makes your job easier. We knew from the beginning we were at or near Earle's Ford. But is this marker accurate? It's about a quarter of a mile from the bridge, and it mentions also Earle's Ford, which is actually across the state line in North Carolina. So while it tells us it's in the area, not always exactly where you're looking for your project. Sometimes they hit it dead on. In fact, most times they do. If you want to go see the marker at Fort Mott, for example, that the DAR put up, it's right there on the ground. Underneath is the chimney of the house that was Rebecca Mott's. So it couldn't be more accurate in that case. Now, the Battle of Earle's Ford took place on July 15, 1780. Part of the upstate campaign of 1780-81, as I mentioned earlier. General Charles McDowell of North Carolina had at least 300 men. Some sources say 700, even 800 men were present. There were South Carolinians present. Now, they went into camp here near Earle's Ford. McDowell unwisely failed to post sentries. He thought they sent out a patrol that day. They didn't see any British or Tories. So fine, everybody just turn in. You're safe. Very wrong. Big mistake. Meanwhile, Colonel John Jones of Georgia, he was with Elijah Clark. They crossed the Savannah River. They're coming up there to link up with McDowell. They're encountering a lot of Tories. So Elijah Clark decided the prudent thing to do is get back into Georgia where he felt safer. They're coming from Augusta, and they think being in North Georgia is a little safer. They'll try to link up with McDowell as soon as they can. Colonel John Jones of Georgia was a little more impatient. He took 35 men and posed as Tories. And they would come into a community and they would get Tory guys to lead them to the next way. So they were posing as Tories. So they got in the vicinity of the project and they went to Gallon's Old Fort. Hey, it's your buddies, we're Tories too. Oh, come right in. And so then they opened fire and shot them up. Killed some, wounded some, captured some got away. Some got away and went down to Fort Prince. You're welcome. They sounded the alarm. 70 dragoons under Major James Dunlap was dispatched to take care of these Georgians. They had no idea McDowell was anywhere near South Carolina. They think there are 35 of these Americans. They outnumbered them 2 to 1. They'll go up there and they'll start kicking butt, taking names. That's what they thought. They rode right into Earle's Ford in the darkness. Open fire. People around campfires. That's how General McDowell found out they were under attack. If he'd had sentries, he would have known about it before they crossed the river. Well, that was a mistake on the part of Dunlap. He had no idea of the size of the American forces and that they were outnumbered as much as 10 to 1 or more. So, also unfortunately for Dunlap and his people, one of the Americans they killed was the son of Colonel Edward Hampton from South Carolina, a member of the Hampton family. Hampton was outraged, and he led a party in pursuit of the retreating loyalists. Later that day, the British stopped to rest near present day. When I say present day, the church building is there, the congregation is defunct. I'm talking about Shiloh United Methodist Church on Blackstocks Road, just south of Inman. Does anybody know where that is? Okay. They stopped there. They figured they were home free. They weren't that far from Fort Prince. They'd be back safe. Well, Hampton caught up with them. He killed a bunch of them, and he chased a bunch. There were 70 of them started out. When he returned to McDowell, he had about 35 or 40 horses with all their dragoon equipment on the sides. That was a pretty good day's work. This is another section of the Mills Atlas. This is Spartanburg District. And here is the North Pacolet River, the North Carolina state line. And if you can't read it, this is the Tugaloo Road right here. And it matches up almost identically with Road S-128. You can still drive on parts of Tugaloo Road. If you leave Gallinsville on Highway 11, you can take a left on the Tugaloo Road and it takes you right down to Highway 414, within sight of the Wee Willis store, where the kidnapping and beatings and shootings took place later at the Willis home. That's the whole Tugaloo Road, still in existence, you can travel on it. But this is it, and it correlates perfectly with our current project. Also, the old Rutherford Road crosses the river just downstream. This is an aerial photograph. Can we turn the lights off, Tom? I don't think you can really see this well enough. It's a little dark in it.
Oh, that's better.
All right. Here is our highway. Here's the bridge, and this is where it's the widest, right here. Notice this yellow mark right here. If you could read that better, it would say Old Ford. Many of you know George Field, South Carolina, what is it? I can't remember. He's been trying to preserve Revolutionary War sites for decades. He came out with us and he walked down, he found this Old Ford. In case you don't know, riverbanks have sharp drops, right? A ford is just where it's been graded out, sort of like a boat ramp. Only you don't launch a boat, you take your horse or wagon or just walk through the water. That's a good place where the water's not too deep, and they cut the banks down so you can just cross there. We also found all of these items right here. Now I'm going to have some of the lights back, Alan, if you don't mind getting up again. I can't keep up with everything in the dark here. When it gets dark, we'll have them back down again when we need the dark. Now, we try to identify archaeological sites. Now, to do this, normally this is done through what we call shovel testing and screening the dirt. We walk systematically across an area. We normally do 100-foot transects. You put shovel test every 50 feet. You dig the subsoil, screen all the dirt, look for artifacts in the screen, look for artifacts on the ground surface, look for signs of archaeological activity on any exposed road banks or river banks, whatever. In big bottoms like this, where you have these big alluvial bottoms along rivers, we bring in a geomorphologist with a backhoe, go 10, 13 feet below the ground surface looking for sites that are 10,000 years old. And for battlefields and certain historic sites, we do metal detector surveys where we go out using metal detectors try to find metallic artifacts. On our project, we did all three of these things. We didn't find much through the dirt screening. We didn't find anything with the backhoe, but the metal detecting, we found this cluster of artifacts right here. And they're all musket bombs and rifle bombs. So we knew we were on the site of the Battle of Earle's Ford. All of these things are mapped in with very accurate global positioning system, GPS systems, that are accurate within about a foot of where the artifact is formed. So you can go back and in the office lab you can generate maps showing you these clusters and concentrations of artifacts. It is not the artifact itself that is important to archaeologists. It's the location. of the artifact is more important. If you ask an archaeologist if he'd rather have the locational information or the artifact, most times he'll take the locational information. That's what's important. Human behavior is patterned. I'm speaking to you as an anthropologist at this point. I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology from the University of South Carolina, a master's degree in anthropology from the University of Tennessee. My specialty is archaeology. But we study human behavior, and archaeologists study past human behavior. There aren't people around to interview. Culture, human behavior, is not random. It is patterned. And we look for those patterns to tell us about the activities of people in the past. So, we've located the battlefield. What do we do now? Well, we think that Revolutionary War battlefield is going to be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Can everybody pretty much agree with that? Do you find an intact Revolutionary War? Pretty important historic site. It's eligible for the National Register. What's the effect of the project? We didn't know. Is it an adverse effect? Maybe. It's not no effect. We're in the battlefield, so it's not no effect. So maybe it's no adverse effect, but we don't know how big the battlefield is. We had 2 days of time left for our archaeological consultants, Rockington and Associates of Atlanta. So we did something a little bit out of character. We don't normally stray outside the area of potential effect, these red lines. If we do, we usually don't go out more than 100 feet. We're along the road. But we got permission from the engineer who was overseeing the project and from the landowners to go out and survey the rest of the site. Because only when we knew what the site represented could we tell you what effect our project would have on the site. Now, here we have superimposed on the topographic map Mills Atlas, and it's been geo-referenced so that it's pretty close. You can see that the alignment of the current road is pretty close to that from the Mills Atlas. This is Tuggerley Road. Here's Rutherford Road right here. We're doing all right. We'll go back. We go outside of where we normally went. We had permission to get all out here. Look at here. Here's a nice big cluster of musket balls. Here's a small cluster. Another big cluster. What we found out, General McDowell got there and he camped near a spring. There's a spring here. I don't know for sure that that's his spring, but it's a spring. Here's a cluster. Here's a cluster. This could be McDowell's camp. We just don't know for sure.
What's the distance across from one end of that site to the other? I can't read it.
This is about 300 yards. Now, I want you to look at this. You might want to turn the lights off for a moment again, Alan, if you would. Remember I showed you the Rutherford Road. There are bridge abutments right here. There's no bridge, but there are abutments on both sides of the river. Why are there bridge abutments? Must have been a road here at one point. Well, remember Tuggerley Road, Rutherford Road? Look at the road. You can still see it. We could see it from over here. This is the old Rutherford Road. We had discovered that they probably came in on the Rutherford Road. Where was McDowell from? Rutherford County. That's the road he came in on. Lights back again, Alan. Sorry, mate, to get up and down. So, at this point, we know what the battlefield represents. It's this huge area. We're just over here on the sides. We can't find any archaeological features, no house remains, nothing, a scattering of bullets, some of them dropped, some of them fired. The fired bullets probably were fired from somewhere else, probably down there. Maybe they missed their targets and went uprange. So now we're in a position to say, we've already done all the metal detecting out here. There are no really any more archaeological techniques we can apply there. We're getting into the battlefield, but it's no adverse effect. So our report goes to the State Historic Preservation Office. That's part of Archives and History. And then it goes to the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation in Washington. And they both have to agree with our proposal, and they did. We were able to build the project, no adverse effect. We've identified a battlefield. We found the whole limits of the battlefield, and that our project is having no adverse effect. And we're saving the taxpayers money. We're not doing any more archaeology because we've pretty much answered all the questions we can on that part of the battlefield. These are some of the bullets that were found. We've got British, it doesn't show well, British 75 caliber Brown Bess bullets. We've got 69 caliber French and American bullets. We've got 65 caliber British carbine bullets. And this bullet right here, these are misshapen from fire. They've hit something. They've either hit a person, a tree, or the ground, and they've gotten smushed up. These are what's called drop bullets. Fell out of somebody's pocket, or he threw his cartridge box away because he was wounded. Nobody picked it up because nobody needed it anymore, and it just left there, and the bullets entered the soil. But this one right here is what people have always called a pain bullet. You've heard the expression, bite the bullet? This one right here. Heard the expression, bite the bullet? This is where it comes from. People were told that they were wounded and they're going to be dressing their wound or trying to extract the bullet. They give them a bullet to bite on. Bite the bullet so you can stand the pain. For years, archaeologists have identified these as pain bullets. There are also stories of soldiers chewing the one on the march to create saliva because they were getting dry. And this gets saliva in the mouth. Well, recent definitive research has demonstrated these are not pain bullets. The chewing was caused by hogs well after the battle was over. This is definitive proof. We're not talking about, well, I don't think a person chewed it, I think a hog chewed it. No. We have had zooarchaeologists and biologists look, and they have matched the impression of the teeth onto the bullets. Those are hog teeth doing the chewing, not human teeth. So the archaeologists have burst their own balloon in this case and can no longer talk about pain bullets. It's a myth, at least as far as the archaeological record. Somebody may have done it, and somebody may someday come up with a bullet that has definite human teeth marks on it. But hog jaws are a lot stronger than human jaws. I have a feeling it'd take a lot of effort for a human to do that, and their teeth are probably going to break first. Hogs, on the other hand, are really good at that. And we'll move along to our second project.
Excuse me, where are those bullets now?
Where are the bullets now?
Yeah.
Our bullets, our artifacts are housed at the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology in Columbia.
So not for the public viewing, right?
Yes, they can be for the public viewing, but you just can't show up and say, I'd like to see the bullets. It's only for things like a museum thing.
Okay.
Now, in the project I'm going to show you about, I had a little bit of a run-in with the curator at the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology. It is in Lancaster County. The Lancaster County Historic Commission has a museum in the old courthouse, a Robert Mills designed courthouse. and I'll do some editorial comment. Are y'all like me? Are y'all residents of Greenville County? Well, hang your head in shame. We are the only county to deliberately destroy a Robert Mills designed courthouse. Sherman burned a bunch. Other people, like the one in Lancaster, burned and they restored it because they're proud to have a Robert Mills courthouse. But in 1923, Greenville tore it down because we wanted progress. So, editorial comments over.
Excuse me, sir. That the Earle's Ford, the private landowner, how do they play into those artifacts? Could they say, no, them's mine?
They agreed what we were asking them to.
Okay.
Sometimes we return artifacts.
Okay.
Like I say, we're interested in the data, the locational data.
You ever had that problem with people wanting stuff?
Yeah, and had problems with other things. We had money at the end of a project. We do archaeological work on projects in 3 phases. First is the survey. You locate the sites. You try to assess them for their eligibility. Phase 2, you do test excavations for a definitive assessment of eligibility. And phase 3, if necessary, is the mitigation through data recovery. So we'd done the phase 1 and we had found the site. We had money left in the budget. This was on the I-73 corridor in Marlborough County. We wanted to go ahead and do the next phase because we still had money. So landowner said, well, I'm a member of a particular tribe of Indians and you won't ever have to go to the tribal council. Actually, his wife was. Well, then you run into a legal question. If we do that, we are, as a state agency, legally recognize those people. And maybe the state government doesn't want to recognize them because they will be liable to provide them with stuff. So my recommendation was we'll buy the property and it's ours, we'll go back and we'll do the second phase. But that project is on hold. So I've been retired for a while. It may never be built. I say that it will be built. It's a congressional mandate. Everything you've seen in the paper, these environmental groups that are fighting it, and says that the DOT has not articulated a reason for the highway. It's called a congressional mandate. The Congress said that this proposed I-73 is part of the interstate highway system, and we've got to build it. You don't have to prove that it's sound or it's going to be good. You have to do what Congress says because it's part of the interstate highway system. North Carolina's version of I-73 is 95% complete. Other portions are under construction. Portions in Virginia are constructed. Portions in other states all the way to Michigan are in construction. But in South Carolina, it's like this is a debatable issue. It's not. It's a congressional mandate. It's like taxes. You got to do it. No debate. Eventually it will get done. Hopefully, just for the sake of, argument, I'd like to see it in my lifetime, just so it'd be done and over with. It's like you do something and you just hang in there over the edge of a cliff. Come on, put the net up, put the net up. We want to see it done. This is a topographic map showing an intersection improvement in Lancaster County. Lancaster's over here, Pavement in Chesterfield County is here, North Carolina is up there, Heath Springs is down south here a little bit. SC 9, SC 522. SC 522 is the old road, Rocky River Road, which goes from Nations Ford at the Catawba River all the way to Camden. The road from Camden goes all the way to Charleston. This road was here as an Indian trail before there were white people around. And it's still a road. This is still a road. This, again, Mills Atlas. This is the road. Here is SC9 today. Here's SC 522. And you can't read that, but it says, and I'm quoting, General Buford's battleground. First he was a colonel. Second, his name was Buford, not Buford. But it is the location of the Battle of the Waxhaws, or Buford's Massacre. Now this battle took place on May 29, 1780. Let me catch you up to date about what was going on then. On May the 12th, Charleston surrendered with over 5,000 men. That was the largest surrender of American forces until Stonewall Jackson took Harper's Ferry in September 1862. He took 12,000 men prisoner there. And then it was surpassed when Bataan surrendered to the Japanese in 1842. 12,000 Americans plus several thousand other Americans eventually in other parts of the Philippines surrendered under the terms there, and 60,000 Filipino soldiers. So it took a while to outdo the surrender of Charleston. Charleston was in British hands. So this group is coming down from Virginia. Colonel Abraham Buford and his 3rd Virginia Detachment were on their way to the relief of Charleston. They got to the Santee River. They were told to cross the river and link up with White's Dragoons. They tarried. As they watched, British Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton decimated White's Dragoons. Buford and his men just standing watching. Might as well have been in the grandstand. He had 380 men, infantry, 40 mounted Virginia Dragoons, and he had 2 6-pounder cannons, and he waited on the other side of the river while Tarleton did that. This was at Lanud's Ferry in present-day Berkeley County. They were watching from Williamsburg County. So, Sir Henry Clinton, in victory, proclaimed that the war was over in South Carolina. Charleston had surrendered. All patriots should lay down their arms, take parole, and sit out the rest of the war as neutrals at home. And a bunch of them did. I'm talking about good people like Colonel Leroy Hammond, General Andrew Williamson, General Andrew Pickens. They took their parole and went home. Thomas Sumter and Francis Marion went into hiding. Of South Carolina troops, about the only ones still in the field were Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hammond. He stayed in the field. He had to hide out in North Carolina for a while, but he stayed in the field. So Charleston surrendered. Governor John Rutledge fled, and Buford was instructed to deliver him to Charlotte, North Carolina, along with several wagons of gunpowder and supplies that were going up to North Carolina for safekeeping. So Buford starts up the Santee, and he's essentially going on modern South Carolina 261 through Manning, over through Sumter County, up to Camden. North of Camden, the road becomes Flat Rock Road. You can drive Flat Rock Road today. If you've been to the Battle of Camden, the battlefield is on Flat Rock Road. Other battles, I've had 4 other battles are along there. 5 are along there. It's a really good trip. You get to see a lot of battlefields. And there's a good bit of interpretation at some of them. So, Tarleton comes after him. And Tarleton has his legion. He's got infantry and cavalry. He's got the infantry riding on the back of some very tired horses. And he's trying to catch Buford. So he sends a courier ahead, and it's a delaying tactic. He asks him to surrender, hoping that Buford will stop so he can catch him. Buford takes the bait. He stops, thinks about it, and says, no, we will not surrender. Too late. Tarleton had caught him. He captured his entire rear guard. He gets ready to go into battle. Buford realizes that he deploys his men in a straight line. Normally when you encounter cavalry, like Tarleton's dragoons, you form squares. And you put the point of the square toward the cavalry attack. You fire shots at them, have your bayonets fixed. Horses are not going to gallop headlong into fixed bayonets. Horses will shy away. This technique was what you're supposed to do. It worked brilliantly for Wellington at Waterloo. The French were defeated. They thought they had them on the run. They formed squares. The French were defeated, primarily through this tactic. Buford, he's never really handled people in the field. He doesn't know what he's doing. He sent the cannons on. He could have set the cannons up in the line. No, he sent them on to North Carolina. Why? People wonder that to this day. After the battle, Tarleton said, if I had received cannon fire, I would not have attacked. You've got the best weapon, why send it up the road? Buford was incompetent, quite frankly. He's on our side, but he's not using good military judgment. So, they swept on. Buford's next dumb idea. Wait till they're 10 yards away before you fire. Yes! 10 yards away, the other side of the room here. You fire, you can't hit everybody, you don't have enough men to hit everybody, and you don't know 5 people might be shooting at the same guy. It's not a good way, you don't have time to reload. They charged in, drew their sabers, and began hacking people to death, even chopping off limbs. At one point, Tarleton's horse goes down. He's trapped underneath. The men think he's dead. He's just lying there under the horse. They get mad. They attack him again. They just chopping these people to bits. I went to a conference on this battle, and a young historian said this was perfectly legal under the rules of European warfare. Once you have been asked to surrender, as Buford was, and you refuse, as Buford did, then there's no quarter. You cannot be blamed for people getting murdered on the battlefield. That is according to the rules of warfare in Europe. We're not in Europe anymore. We're in America. The people in the area, people who came out to take care of the sick and wounded. There were 113 Americans killed, 150 wounded, 53 taken prisoner. Some of the dead had their arms and legs hacked off. One survivor had 23 bayonet wounds and saber wounds. The battle was over. It's an easy British victory, a horrific American defeat. This obelisk was put here in 1860. This is right there on the road. This is a mass grave that contains what appear to be the remains of 80 of the American dead. There is supposed to be another mass grave. A lot of people have looked for it. We did too. We couldn't find it. We thought we had it. It turns out it was some sort of wetland or pond that a farmer filled in the 20th century. It looked good on ground penetrating radar, but it didn't pan out. What we thought might have been skeletons were some rocks, big rocks that were used to help fill it in with the dirt. So this monument was erected in 1860, and in 1865, one branch of Sherman's army marched past this monument, and some of the Yankees noted in their letters home and in their diaries the monument to this battle from the Revolutionary War. Now, the local citizens came out to take care of the wounded. They were horrified by what they saw. Among those attended to the wounded was 13-year-old Andrew Jackson, his older brother, and his mother. The Jacksons were horrified. As a result of what they saw, the Jackson brothers immediately enlisted in the Patriot cause. They were serving mostly as couriers and working at a depot that was opened up in the Waxhaws for the American side. Other citizens were very upset. Everybody in the upstate, they were just seething with anger. People were so upset about this that people like those that had taken their parole and gone home, they said, all bets are off. And then they're upset with this because it may have been legal in Europe, but this was found objectionable to Americans' sense of fair play. We had already evolved enough since we had left Europe that we had our own ideas about right and wrong. For example, taxation like the Stamp Act and murdering people on the battlefield. It may have been legal, but it violated America's sense of fair play. So, all these people who had gone home, some of them started coming back. And then, Sir Henry Clinton, who had told them they could take their parole and go home and sit it out as neutrals, he said, okay, now you have to come back and serve on our side. No longer stay at home. I'm changing the rules. Well, that really just tipped off a lot of people. And people who had been home as neutrals and had not taken sides yet saw the results of this and said, okay, I understand now. I want to be on the American side. And they enlisted for the first time because their sense of fair play. So it was a very big and important stuff. As I said, this is why we won the war for the other 12 colonies. If this hadn't happened, we wouldn't have put Cornwallis on the run all the way to Yorktown. Yes, Al?
Across the street is a field with flags in it. That's where the battle took place? Across from where I've been there before, where the grave is.
I don't know about the field of flags.
There's all kind of, they put plastic flags on it.
Oh, okay. When did you go?
Maybe a year or so ago.
Maybe more?
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe about 8 years ago?
Not that long, no.
I didn't know they'd last that long. It's a historical marker. Again, I like it when people put markers out for us, letting us know where the historic sites are. Originally, this red line was our area of potential effect. We're putting left turn lanes in, right turn lanes on all four corners. We needed new right-of-way. You can see the road there. Well, my first contribution to this project, I went out there and I said, look here, fellas. The road, if you can see these little dashed lines, goes all, this is the original 18th century road. It crosses the road just down here and all the way down to near Heath Springs. You can see parts of the original road off to left and right sides. Sometimes you're on the original road, sometimes you can see it in the woods, sometimes you can see it in people's front yards. We found artifacts up here on that side of the road. We found artifacts here. We found them all the way down here. Originally, we were going to take new right-of-way here. This area right here, the Blue Woods, all the way out to the road, that's a site already listed in the National Register. Part of the battlefield and part of where they buried the dead there in the mass grave. It's listed in the National Register. I said, guys, you can't just go down through that National Register property. Can we cut the right-of-way short? And they did. They cut it off right there. But we're still having an adverse effect because we're into the battlefield all over the intersection. We can't move the intersection. The intersection's got to stay where the two roads meet. You can't pull it off down here and put big curves in the road. Plus, you're probably going to go through all kinds of things, including a big recreation complex that the county has down here, just out of view. So, we're going to have an adverse effect. So again, what can we do? Talking about a battlefield, not your normal archaeological sites. Is this what you saw, Alan?
I think so, yeah.
This is during, turn the light off for this, Alan. This is during the metal detecting survey. Here's the monument right here. This is the mass grave. These are two of the archaeologists. They are doing the survey of the entire battlefield. We decided that, and got approved by the SCDOT and the Advisory Council in Washington, the best thing to do was mitigate by doing a survey of the entire battlefield. They're doing a survey, they're doing it in transects. They're passing as far as you can swing your metal detector from side to side. Then you go back and you do it right next to that point, so the whole pasture area is identified. And this guy dragging his shovel and sweeping with his metal detector. You can tell from the lack of trees and the fact that these guys are wearing heavy jackets, this took place in winter. And all of these yellow pin flags that apparently lasted longer than I thought, those are where all of the mostly bullets but other artifacts were found here. This is a result of the survey, which is actively going on. He's put his metal detector, his earphones down, he's dug some dirt out, he has found a musket ball right there. In fact, I think he's putting it in his pocket, in a bag that's properly labeled, and he's taking a GPS unit out and recording that information. These are some of the bullets from Buford's massacre. You've got your 75 caliber Brown Bess, you've got 69 caliber balls, American and French, you got 65 caliber British carbine balls, and you have 50 to 60 caliber long rifle bullets that the Americans used a lot of, especially militia. He had some militia with him, and they had trouble getting enough military muskets, and so a lot of guys brought their long rifles from home, or their Fowlers, their muzzle-loading shotguns. So these are some of the bullets that were found. Found 160 total. And these are so-called pain bullets. Take a look at this one. That has been chewed extensively by that hog. So I remember being in a conference when this was revealed. No pain bullets, they're hog bullets. And even when they're chewed and misshapen, you can still tell what the caliber is. You weigh the bullets. If you are a hunter, you know about bullets, how many grains the bullet is. We're talking weight here. There's a complex formula. You weigh the bullet, and it can tell you the caliber of the corresponding spherical bullet. These are other artifacts from there at the battlefield. This is a finial on a bayonet frog. You know, the scabbard you put your bayonet for it to hang on the belt. It has a little brass thing that you slide through a slot, and that's what that is. This is the nose cap from a Brown Bess musket. This is a ramrod pipe where you slide the ramrod of your British carbine. This would be for a 65 caliber British carbine. These are roller buckles from accoutrements, like a cartridge box. And these are also, these grommets are from cartridge boxes. You put those in to hold the leather together. These are 18th century pocket knives, two of them there. These are very mangled shoe buckles. And this is a British neck stock buckle or clasp. The British soldiers wore these leather neck stocks that fastened with one of those. The early U.S. Marines wore these things too. That's why they're called leather necks, because of the leather neck stocks. And this is a British version, and that's the clasp that holds the two sides of the leather neck stock together. These are the artifacts that were found. This can't even show you the whole site. This is all the site. We only found a few in this field. It was a low swampy area that's been filled in with clay. We couldn't get the metal detectors to go through enough of that clay deep enough to find the artifacts. Just along the old road bed could we find some. Notice these concentrations. And this concentration here is mostly accoutrements, which if you're running away, trying to get away from a battle you just lost, you start throwing your musket down, taking off your cartridge box and belt, throwing those things down. If we could have followed the road up, I'm sure we would have found a lot of those artifacts on up the road. Clusters of artifacts. Clusters everywhere. And these turned out to be a lot of dropped British musket balls. And this, I'm going to close with, this is our reinterpretation of the battle. This is not what you'll read in history books, because the one thing I've experienced as an archaeologist, you can tell an archaeologist, tell a historian what the archaeology tells you about the battle, and they'll ignore you, because it ain't written in a book. Doesn't matter. Buford said he was east of the road. 90% of his people were. But our artifacts show that he was west of the road also, in the area of the mass grave. Tarleton came out here, and his subordinates came there, and this is where they were overwhelmed. They tried to rally here, and then the survivors fled. So we're here to tell you that while most of them are east of the road, and remember, the road is right here. It's not here. That's the modern road. The original road is right here. So even if you listen to the historians, when they say, well, it's east of the road, it's not the existing road. They all think it's the existing road that they were east of. This is the original road over here. So that's our interpretation. We also put up kiosks there to explain the battle. We were required by our agreement with Archives and History that we would let certain historians review the kiosk and give their input as to what was said. And they said, oh, we don't want this at all. We don't like this kiosk. We don't like this over here. And so our consultant says, what are we going to do? They object all of it. I said, we are required to consult with them. We have consulted. We're going to ignore them because they're talking about history and we're trying to tell people about archaeology. And that's what they wanted. They said, we don't want to hear about the archaeology. I said, okay, you don't, go pay for your own kiosk. We're the archaeologists, we're paying for these, and we're putting them up. Go ahead, turn this on there, Alan, please. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
The mass graves, how well were they able to identify the soldiers that were killed versus those that ran away?
Don't really know.
Don't really know.
We have not excavated them and we don't intend to. There's really no justification except for our curiosity to dig them up. The government and the citizens of this country hold graves that are a result of our battles to be rather sacred places, so we don't readily disturb them. If we discover people or have to move them because of the project, we didn't have to move them. So we don't have any reason to.
Was that pretty common?
Mass graves? Yes.
Well, not necessarily mass graves, but the identification of those that died. Was that very common that there was identification?
Depends on whose side you're on. If you go to Gettysburg, you see big mass graves. It says Confederate mass grave. How come all the Yankees have their names on them? They won the battle, they held the ground. If you go to Richmond, you've got a lot of people with their names on them in the Confederate cemeteries. Of course, they lost the records for White Oak Cemetery, where some of my people were buried, so we don't know where they were. We know they were in there somewhere, Mike?
Well, part of your explanation may be the hog bullets that you're talking about, because your biggest competition to get into these people's bodies are going to be the hogs.
Well, these people were intentionally buried.
Well, I mean,
People,
before they could get them buried
Yeah.
even.
well, they were buried pretty quickly. The people like the Jackson family, there were hundreds of local people there tending to the wounded and burying the
But
dead.
not until the British left.
They left pretty quickly. They left pretty quickly. And these people were non-combatants. Talking about Mrs. Jackson and her 2 teenage boys, both of which were less than military age. Andrew was 13, I think his brother was 15. So they were both underage. So they were buried pretty quickly. The question is, where are the other people? There's another grave out there that people talked about in the old days. And like I said, we thought we might have had it.
It was a running battle that had been spread out.
There would
all
be
over.
some, especially some that fled and may have been mortally wounded and died leaning up against a tree 2 miles up the road. He probably was never found.
Yep.
Yes, Al.
Also, one thing about Waxhaw is not, no, the town of Waxhaw is nowhere near the battlefield. Waxhaw's actually North Carolina.
Waxhaw, first off, is a Catawba name, and it referred to Catawba village location. And Waxhaw is an area in North and South Carolina. And so, Waxhaw, the town, is in North Carolina. That's still part of the Waxhaws.
Okay.
That's still the Waxhaws. Waxhaws is an area on both sides. Up around Van Wyck, that's the Waxhaws too. And Andrew Jackson State Park is in the Waxhaws. That's where he was born. In fact, he was actually born at Major Crawford's house, which is between 521 and the Catawba River, south of the road.
And what was the name of this road?
This road, South Carolina, 522, and left to right is Highway 9,
Okay.
which comes from Highway 11 down through Bowling Springs, goes down through Spartanburg, Union County, goes all the way to the beach. In fact, when we lived in Bowling Springs, North Carolina, that's the way we got to the beach, was down Highway 9.
Said something River Road.
Rocky River Road.
Rocky River Road.
Yeah. That's what it is. And it's the old wagon road from Nations Ford, which is near Fort Mill, all the way to Canada. So that was the closest thing you had to a highway back then.
So what people called Pastor Carlton's,
Called what?
when they said Carlton's quarter, that wasn't true then, was it? Because he was indisposed at that time, right? He didn't give the orders for that to go on.
Oh yeah, he did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He did that anytime you refused surrender. He did that.
Okay. Because at Kings Mountain, they made a big deal about that. And that's why they hung some of the prisoners.
Yeah. Well, that was revenge, actually.
Right.
Because of their participation in earlier fights. There was a lot of bad blood, and I tell people, at least in the South during the Revolution, it was a really civil war. It was brother against brother. They talk about that, about the 1860s, but you saw a lot of that right here. Brother against brother, and family within the family. I've always found it ironic that probably the worst Tory other than Tarleton was Bloody Bill Cunningham. And one of his relatives, a cousin twice removed or something, was Pamela Cunningham, who established the Mount Vernon Foundation, which saved Mount Vernon. It's called the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, I believe it is. And she was from down here in Lawrence County. She was related to Bloody Bill Cunningham, but her people were on the other side in the Revolution. And believe me, he went out of his way to get even with his family members that were on the other side. It was vicious. Yes.
I will mention that Bloody Bill Cunningham was at the Battle of Canebrake, which we can see next week, but he was there as a patriot. He started out as a patriot.
He did. And he got whipped.
Yeah.
And because of his own problems, and then he decided to switch sides.
He did.
And that's why he was always angry, because of the whipping he got.
Exactly.
If he'd been caught after the war, that whipping would have been nothing to what he got. I remember that some people that came into Long Canyon, modern day Abbeville County, the followers of Cunningham, the Tory fighters, they wouldn't come back after the war, but they wanted their property. They sent their wives back. And one of them's wife showed up at the family home. And the women in the community all cut big switches and they whipped her all the way to the Savannah River.
Yep.
And she didn't come back again. And the ladies took that upon themselves. Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Can we do get some of those?
I didn't finish the story about Lancaster County and Waxhaw. So I'm trying to get the artifacts to the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology. And I wanted them to then loan them to Lancaster County for their museum. They said, no, we don't loan stuff. I said, yes, you do. You have it in the State Museum. You have it in other museums. You have stuff. And the lady told me, no, we don't. I said, yes, you do. I went to her boss, and he said, yes, we do. We have a procedure for loaning out artifacts to museums. If Lancaster County, she refused to do it. So I took the artifacts, and I drove up to Lancaster. This is the last thing I did before I retired. It was during Christmas break. I was on annual leave, and I drove to Lancaster in my own vehicle and delivered them to the lady who was president of the Historical Association. The bullets you just saw, marked in Lancaster, I hope they're on display. I haven't been back to look. So I took it into my own hands.
They didn't fire you?
No, they were retired.